success is different for everyone. For some people, it's money, it's advancement. It might be taking care of your family. Well, your version of success when you were a student, 20, 21, how is it different now? What your version of success is? Does it change?
Well, I was a non-traditional student, so I went back to Mexico State when I was in my 30s. And I had a wife and a newly born child. And so at that point, my success was really trying to provide for them. So find a job in a city where we had opportunity to provide for them. And I don't think that's ever changed. I think it's been the same. But when you get into, say, a corporation like Laguna Development Corporation, there's so much opportunity. Your focus kind of changes when you think, I want to be at the very top of this organization. I want to be part of this organization that's fast moving, and I want to add my contribution to the success of this organization. And that's probably kind of how it changed for me when you finally find that place you want to work the next 25 years at. Then you really want to invest and be better at that place.
Now, how many students are interested in entering the casino business or the energy business, oil and gas business? Anyone? Got one? I'm curious, Eric, when you were a student, were you interested at that time before you were a junior G-man to go into the energy business?
I mean, the energy business was not even in my radar. I didn't know anything about it. The only thing I knew was when I saw Exxon Corporation on the interview schedule, I go like, well, they're a large company. And one of the things that came back to me, I was a Delta Sig here, and we would bring in guest speakers, being the professional business fraternity. And I remember one person coming in and talking to me and said, well, you really need to make a choice. You can either be a small fish in a big pond, or you can be a big fish in a small pond. And I remember asking the person that was saying that, I said, well, why can't you be a big fish in a big pond? Why are you restricting yourself? And when I was interviewing with Exxon, that's kind of the approach I was taking. And I actually thought my interview was a bomb. Because the guy I was talking to was looking out the window when I was telling him my experience as a bank examiner and how I took some bankers to task in El Paso and made them write off all these assets, and I felt pretty good about that. And I look over at him, and he's looking out the window. I'm going like, oh, I'm making a pretty good impression here, aren't I? But it came back, and he did like what I was saying, and so you can't always take what an interviewer is doing to say this is a great interview or it's a poor interview.
Any other questions out there? Yes.
I have a question. You said to keep your options open. What do you say to a student perhaps that doesn't have a stellar GPA or anything like that, and they get offered a job? What is that kind of student does, as opposed to students who have over a 3.5?
Well, from my point of view, when I hire, I don't normally always look at the GPA. The GPA doesn't mean a lot to me as much as it does. A lot of times when we pull transcripts, I'll look at their accounting, how they did in their accounting classes. I recently hired a kid who his first 2 years were a disaster. A disaster, like F's and D's his first 2 years. And I asked him, I said, what happened your freshman and sophomore years? And he went through a lot of personal things with his family. I think his grandfather passed away during that time, and he really struggled in school the first 2 years. The last 2 years, he did really well. I mean, some of those classes he had to take over, he made B's, A's in those classes. And so his GPA wasn't very good. His cumulative GPA was pretty poor overall because of all the things that figured into that. But there's always a reason. When you look at a student, you can't just look at one thing and say, well, I'm just going to hire people who are 3.5 and above. I look at the whole student as together. What activities were they in? Did they work while they were in school? Did they struggle because of something that happened in their personal life during the early years or some point in their career? And so you just got to be honest as a student. You got to tell, when they ask you a question, you got to tell them why you struggled in something. I've had people who worked for me that back when I was at RDW, we did a lot of governmental audits, and I've had people work for me that just weren't very good governmental audit or accounting students. I mean, governmental accounting is so different from everything else, and their honesty is important. If they just tell you, I just didn't get governmental accounting, it just didn't make sense to me. I'm like, okay, well, we won't put you in any government audits. But you have to be honest, you have to be truthful about things, and you still got to, even if you don't have a high GPA, you got to believe in yourself. You got to believe that if I get in there and I work hard and I listen and I communicate, I can be just as good as anybody else. And if you believe that, then it will work. It will be successful.
And then I have a question too. I know like a lot of employers, they require you. The reason why I'm saying this is because I have several friends who are kind of in that boat. You know, they really messed up their first or second year, and now they just lack confidence, and they can't even get an interview because most companies require, you know, a 3.0 or higher or a 3.5 or higher, especially in accounting. So like, what I'm saying is, how do they even get past that process now that a lot of things are online, where it automatically disregards you if you don't even have a 3.0 or a 3.5, you know, and maybe how does your hiring process work for your company? Is it just, you know, a different process compared to most?
Yeah, we don't do, at least in our area, we don't do a minimum GPA requirement. So when we file with the placement office, and they ask us that question, we don't set a GPA. I know there are some companies. When I came out of college, I really wanted to go to work for Sandia National Labs. That was probably one of the firms I wanted to interview with more than any other firm. And I didn't have a high enough GPA. I think they required at that time either 3.75 or 3.5, and I was like at a 3.4 or something. So I couldn't even interview with them, which was disappointing. But I interviewed with 12 other firms that were, you know, I met their GPA requirements. I interviewed with them. I got a fabulous job with RDW, and it's kind of led to my, you know, career I have now. The problem, I think, what they may struggle with is not getting as many interviews. But I would say that one of the crucial things, especially here, is go to meet the firms, meet people directly. So talk to these companies. So talk to, you know, the Travis and the Erics and the Mr. Smiths, and those people, get to know them, and then ask for that exception. Say, I know I don't meet your minimum GPA requirements because I struggled in this point of my career, but I believe, you know, sometimes you have to work a little harder, so you got to tell them, I know I can do a good job for you. Please, you know, allow me to have an interview. You don't meet that minimum requirement. And I would say most of those companies are going to be open to that. If you're honest with them and you're upfront and you tell them, I want to be part of your firm, I want an interview, then they'll give you an interview. Those GPA requirements, usually they use them to try to cut down as many interviews, you know, kind of decrease the amount of interviews they're going to do. It doesn't mean they're not going to hire people who don't have a 3.5 GPA or a 3.75 GPA. It's just a guideline to keep them within some constraints on how many students are going to interview.
Sure.
You know, I'd like to add something in terms of students learning to play to your strengths. And you really want a job where the main thing for that place is that they want a 3.5 or whatever. And on that note, I'd like to ask Joe Lujan to comment on GPA versus interpersonal skills in your industry and where you think that comes out.
She's right. I think that the key is playing to your strengths, and if you're an outgoing person, then maybe, you know, a sales career or something like that might be the best thing for you. And I agree with Harold that you know, if that's your strength, then use it. Talk to the people. Use your networks. Try to get people that you know to see if they can open doors for you. And it's not all about just this is your GPA, and so I got to go down this little path. Most people never end up in the career that they start. I mean, very few people, especially in the insurance industry or anything else, say, you know what, when I grow up, I'm going to be an insurance guy or whatever. That's just not what happens. But You get a job, you start figuring your way through, and you land in some of the things that you're comfortable with. But then there's one other thing that I'd like to say is that invest in yourself. And what I mean by that, I tell everybody all the time when they start, my nephews, my own kids, do more than you get paid for. And everybody says, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that? Well, the reason why is because you're the first one that moves up the line if that's what happens. And trust me, if there's layoffs or cuts, which every company has done here somewhat recently, you don't go through and say, well, I'm going to take the last guy in or anything. You want to keep the best talent possible. So if you're doing more than you make yourself invaluable, you stay in, you get bigger raises and those kind of things. So don't be afraid to invest in yourself by doing more than you get paid for.
Leslie had one comment I think feeds into what you're saying, asking Liz.
You know, I agree, and I think don't ever underestimate the value of an exceptional cover letter. I think that oftentimes you can't even get an interview, so it's this mass emailing and mailing and whatever. I have hired people off of a cover letter alone because it was extremely well written. It was personal. They demonstrated their desire, their commitment, and that is really, now I understand if you're going to be an accountant, you have to have the basic accounting and all of that, but for many management positions and sales positions, it really can be what you demonstrate in those 3 paragraphs you put on top of a resume or 4 paragraphs that'll make them turn the page and maybe overlook a minimum GPA requirement.
So those type of students that have a lower GPA because of their first or second year, they're not folks who are a good student. You know, it takes them more to learn, right? You know, some people, I was advantaged that my accounting came pretty easy to me. I had a roommate. It didn't. He was an accounting major also, but he goes like, "You make me sick," because the accounting comes easy to you. Those people are going to have to work harder. They are. They're going to have to beat the payment. They're going to have to say, give themselves some options. I'm willing to move to Lovington to work an oil and gas job, even though I don't know Lovington or I hate Eastern New Mexico or something like that. You have to really open up your options, and you're going to have to work harder. And that's what I would say to your friends is that, but there's still opportunities out there.
Eric, we'll put a little twist on Howard as well. Let's say I'm an accounting major, and that's who we got talking today. I'm a 4.0. I aced every class I took, even Dr. Scribner's class, A+, highest percentage ever. And I come sit down to you for an interview, cross my legs and say, I'm the deal. I'm the real deal. I got a 4.0. What do you want to know?
Oh,
Is that all I need? Is that GPA speak for itself?
You know, I've interviewed that lady. I have. And one's positive, very confident, possibly overconfident. You know, when you're in an office, you're not just working knowledge. You got a lot of personalities going on. And, you know, I worked with a number of attorneys that were extremely bright. They were a pain in the butts. And no one else in the group wanted to work with them because they were arrogant and they had terrible interpersonal skills. They were still successful, but no one really worked with them. So my challenge to the person that comes off that way is, how are they going to work in my office? How are they going to work with others? They might be, you know, the person that has the great skills that I need. And I don't expect them to be buddy-buddy with everyone in the office. And you'll have those people. An office environment is a mixture of lots of personalities and lots of strengths and weaknesses. So I, as an interviewer, I would have to evaluate how would that person fit into my office environment.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I've interviewed that same person as well, and I've worked with those people as well too. It really is, and my experiences in the profession has always been you work with a lot of people closely, and so you have to be able to have a lot of interpersonal skills. I sit right now as a CFO, I'm a part of a senior management team that includes 11 to 13 people. So we as a group a lot of times make decisions as a group. So you have to be able to work together. And there's some very, very intelligent people in that room when we're talking and we're trying to figure out what the right decision is to make. When you have people that come in and interview that way and say, you know, I've done what I have to do to get a job with you because I'm a 4.0, that's all. I've done more than anyone else, so you need to hire me just because I've been a great college student. As I said before, it doesn't end at the college. Now is where it starts about how are you going to work within that organization? How are you going to be a team member with those other people that you're sitting in that office, in that room with? My experience in public accounting, a lot of times those students who, unfortunately, that have the highest GPAs struggle being part of the team because a lot of times they're individuals, so they have great abilities to learn and understand what you tell them. They don't want to work with either other people, and they don't have patience for listening to you tell them things. And I think that's the biggest struggle I've seen is they think now that they're here, they've reached it, and so they don't have to work as hard, and they don't have to listen, they don't have to do as much as all the other people within that team are doing. And so I just, when I interview people like that, I try to find out, what have you done as far as the teamwork, and what have you done with other students, or if, give them scenarios and say, hey, if you have someone in your group that isn't doing their job, what do you do for that person? And a lot of times, depending on their answer, they'll blow that person off and they'll say, well, we'll leave them behind, I'll just pick up their slack and do the work. That doesn't always work so well in a real environment, so you have to be able to work together and figure out how to help the whole team succeed rather than individuals succeed.
Very good. Any other questions or comments?
Just a comment, I just feel like a lot of students just really stress the fact of, GPA, and I wish that they were here to actually hear from, business professionals that it's not always about GPA, because I think they just kind of disregard themselves, so it's really nice hearing that you guys look at other aspects as far as what's really stressed to us as we're taking the classes, that you need to have a really good GPA in order to get into certain places.
Yeah, there are some companies, and Exxon Mobil is one of them right now, that.
Oh, I was when you're finished.
Okay. Is that they restrict who they're interviewing. There's a bunch of us in the office that I couldn't get a job with the company now because my GPA was not enough to do their threshold. I don't agree with their threshold. You can just see who has accomplished and who's grown in the company, and you go and ask them, what was your GPA? So, well, I had a 3.1, 3.2. Well, what was your degree? Oh, I was a mechanical engineer and everything. But they wouldn't even interview you now. And so I think it's short-sightedness on some corporations that are doing that. But it happens. And whether it's an accounting firm, a corporation, some of them are going to be restrictive and do that. And you just have to understand that.
Yeah.
At our last meeting, we had some real pearls of wisdom as we're getting today. We suggested videotaping, which terrific is being done, and this is going to be on a website. So for your friends that aren't here, they'll be able to observe these. Okay. Excellent.
Dustin, you had a comment, question?
It was just going through in my head. Earlier you said interview with as many firms as possible, and I'm kind of in that boat where you have multiple offers coming in. What's the best way to turn down internships or even full-time offers without burning that bridge in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you just have to be very, very professional and polite and let people know how much you appreciate the offer. But at this, what I did a lot of times is just tell people, I appreciate the offers. You have an awesome firm, but I have so many other offers that I have to make a decision. And they understand. Business people understand. If you have 3 or 4 offers, You can't do them all. You have to pick one out of the 3 or 4, and just be polite and very appreciative of the opportunity that they presented to you, and you know, I think if you take that approach, they'll remember that, and when you know they made an offer to you for a lot of reasons, and those reasons are still going to be there down the line. So if you're a junior now, you're going to do an internship this year. When they come back around and interview for that, when you're a senior, they interview, they're going to remember you, and they're going to remember you in a positive way, not in a negative way. So just keep everything positive, professional, and you won't burn that bridge.
But that's a great point, because when I was interviewing, I came into that, I interviewed CPA firms, and one of them came down from Albuquerque and said, "Are you interested to come up in Albuquerque and talk to our office?" I said, "Well, not really." I said, I really want to move out of New Mexico. I grew up in New Mexico, I've gone to school here. I want to see what's outside of New Mexico. And they say, "Okay, well, you know, we interview for our office. If it's the Phoenix office or the Tucson or the Dallas office, they do their own interviewing. So you can't go visit them based upon my interview, even though I really like them." I said, "Okay." Well, about 2 weeks later, I'm getting on a plane out of Las Cruces Airport, and I'm going up to where? I'm going up to Santa Fe to interview with the firm there. And wow, who do I run into? I run into that interviewer, and he looks at me and he goes like, "Well, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm flying up to Santa Fe." "Oh, really?" And he remembered this. He remembered. And I said, "Well, I'm going to be moving out of New Mexico." I'm like, "Well, why are you going up to Santa Fe?" So I'm going like, "Oh man, I'm busted." But I said, "Well, you know, I'm interviewing with this firm. I know they only have a Santa Fe office, but you know, you know, they don't have other offices. They don't have a Phoenix office or a Dallas office." I said, "So this is really my only opportunity." And so it gives me an opportunity to see what their office is like. And he was comfortable with that. But you do have to be careful with that.
Travis, I was going to tell you, so also, my first job I accepted to move to Dallas. 2 weeks later, I got another offer from somebody else I had interviewed with here on campus. Now, I had accepted position A, but I really wanted position B. So here comes position B after I've committed to position A. And let me tell you, I accepted position B. So calling position A and telling them after I had accepted them, they'd flown me to Dallas to interview. My Catholic guilt was kicking in horribly. But I've never looked back on that as a bad decision, because at the end of the day, company A, they may have been mad at me for a week or so. They had to regroup and find somebody else. But company B was really the right place for me. And so I think you have to, at the end of the day, really take it all into, don't be afraid to do what's really right for you, and just be professional at all times. But that could happen to you, because it's a real thing.
Was part of your question, how do you postpone somebody?
Not necessarily postpone, but that's also a good thing to hear. Because when you throw out a bunch of lines and some come in right away and the other ones you're still waiting for them to come back, I would like to know how to postpone people too. That's a good.
All right. See, women are better at this because they have to deal with
Men?
prom dates.
Oh.
It's very, see if this is acceptable. Is it fair to say to somebody, "Look, I just spent 4 years working hard to get this degree. I've got student loans. I really feel like I owe it to myself and my family to pursue the best opportunity. I've got 2 more interviews to go. Can you respect the importance of making the right decision and give me another 3 weeks to make a decision," or something like that? Does that work for you?
I think that works. That's better than what prom guys said.
I deal with close to 300 students every year, not only on internships but permanent jobs. What we tell the students is pick the ones you want the best. Go after them first. And that way you eliminate that in many cases where I really wanted to work for company A. That's who I'm applying for first. That's where I'm going to really work hard on. I'm not gonna send out 15, 20, 30 resumes. I'm gonna send out five more. Hopefully it doesn't take that long. Hopefully you send out 5. Those are the 5 you really want, and you get that one and you're happy with it. And that's a perfect world, yes, but you don't want to burn the bridges, especially if you're in a very tight industry. Accounting, for instance, you don't want to burn the bridges. Golf management, that's very tight. So you go after who you want first, and hopefully that happens. Delaying it, a lot of times the company delays you. And if they delay you, then you got to protect yourself. So.
You did the right thing for you.
I would also recommend, if you have offer 1, you're waiting on offer 2, proactively call company number 2. Tell them they're the lead, but you have an offer with a deadline. Can they move up their decision? Can they give you an indication? Make them give you an answer so that you can make an informed choice, because you should tell company 2, I don't want to burn any bridges with company 1. So you just force them to get off their timeline.
That's great advice. Negotiating power is a function of the number and quality of your options. If you've got options, you've got some leverage.
Yeah.
So go ahead and exercise.
And company 2 wants to go with your offer.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you, Howard.
One more student question.
Yes?
Yeah, I actually have a question. What do you do in the event? I know a lot of firms, who come, for example, like Ernest & Young. I've had friends who've gotten job offers and they only give them 2 weeks and they don't graduate till the next semester. I was kind of in the same position too. I was only given a week to make my decision, and what do you do in that event? And he, it was on a Tuesday, and he wanted for me to get back to him by Friday. And I, asked to extend that for at least, a week. But how do you, so young, make a decision that's possibly going to change your life in a matter of a week? You know what I mean? And what if you find another opportunity, later on down the road? This was back in September, so what do you do in the event that, that were to happen? Any advice?
We have a policy in that they're not supposed to do that. If they go through campus interviewing, we've sent out letters to, those are called exploding offers and unethical, and they're not supposed to happen here in this campus. So report it to faculty members.
I think it's important to note that that's actually a standard timeline when you get out of school and you've interviewed for a job. The company will usually give you a week because we don't have time either. And usually we're down to 3 candidates. If you're our lead, we want to know. If you don't want us, I got to get number 2 before they go. When you are in a campus environment, as long as school makes a policy that our students have to be given until November to make a decision, then the company should know that rule and they should be abided by it. So I completely agree. But understand when you get out of school, a week is very normal. I've had circumstances where I've given 48 hours. I'm like, that's all I got. That's what you need to do.
One of our advisory councils, who's kind of taking a break right now, I believe his name is Ryan. I can't remember. I know he's an accountant. The comment he had was that, especially at the career fairs, students would go from booth to booth, company to company. I love your company. I really want to work for you. Next one. I love your company. I really want to work for you. It was the same thing. And a question a lot of companies will have is, well, why did you apply and want to interview if you weren't interested? Now that offer came, what you asked for. Of course, if there's different options there, you got to make decisions. But that was a kind of, he had some feedback from especially New Mexico State students, is kind of find those companies. And the comment that to list your top hat was saying that go after those top ones first, because then boom, if you get that offer, that's the one I wanted. And you're able to say that, respond quickly, enthusiastic. Margaret, I'm curious, in your kind of know that 1 week, is it different when a candidate says yes right away? Boom, here's your offer. The next day, yes, I can't wait to come work for you. Versus wait until that 6th day, then saying, yes, I'm going to come work for you.
No,
or does it not matter?
Our HR manager who extends the offer knows you have to have time. You
Sure.
may have to talk to a spouse. We may be asking you, to leave right before a bonus with another company. There's always things. So we give you your 6 days.
Sure.
But by day 6, we're going to pressure you. We're
Well,
going to say, we gave you 6 days. I want an answer. now.
Sure. I work in the healthcare world, when it comes to recruiting physicians, surgeons, a lot of times a big deal, big financial impact, everything else, and they're pretty strict on that at that time. Boom, you have till this time. After that, not necessarily the deal's off the table, but we're going to have to come back to the table and negotiate.
Yes.
So,
Our offer letters are written as the offer expires in 6 days.
Yes.
So,
Yes, John?
One of the things I think is important when you're interviewing, do some research on that company.
Yes.
The last thing I like to hear is for them to walk in and go, well, tell me about your company. I'm like, you already did, okay? So if you are going to interview with somebody, at least do some basic research.
And if you follow up with a letter, spell the company name. If ever by chance you get to an interview with Exxon Mobil, there's no E on the end of Mobil. The highest capitalized company in the world, right, by stock price. Well, I guess we're behind Apple now, especially with their 10% raise yesterday. But I get a follow-up letter from an interview, and it's Exxon Mobil.
That's probably from a 4.0 student who's telling you misspelled it.
Yeah, maybe so. But I mean, just be cognizant of if you're doing a follow-up letter, make sure you're right. Don't have the spelling errors, things like that.
Excellent. Yes,
I just want to get your impression on this because I had this happen. You know, for a lot of students, this will be their first time, and so they get this interview and they may have to travel. What's your impression of a parent traveling with them, and where do you draw the line when they get to the location where that interview is going to take place? The reason I bring this up, I was in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we brought in this one candidate that had just graduated, brought his mother, and the mother didn't drop him off. The mother got down and actually met myself and the other person that was going to be doing the interview and hung out in the lobby there. I mean, where do you draw the line?
You know, Anthony, I've never had a mother show up to the office with the candidate. I would consider that a negative.
Yeah.
I really would. It just there's either one there's the parent has no confidence or there's no confidence of the child being able to make a judge of this individual or this company. It would not be positive at all. And I would say, I'm trying to think the movie of the Road Trip. Yeah, and the guy, the mother is saying, oh, you need to market your product like this, this. No, Mom, I don't need to do that. So I would tell the candidate that it's great to meet your parent. And then it says, now if you'll excuse us, we're gonna have the interview.
Yeah.
But I think I would take it as a negative.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Well, that's kind of how we took it as well, but I think it's good for students to hear that because, for the first time you're going to go somewhere, the nerves, but anyhow, so thanks.
Well, but there are some sensitivities I ran into that be cognizant of as the interviewers and to a certain extent the students. But, we had a policy that we would have interviews during the course of the day, and then 2 people would take the individual to lunch. And not uncommon with some interviewing process. Well, there's some religious things you need to consider in that, whether where you're choosing for lunch, or whether or not they can eat during daylight hours at all. And it was just a shock to me that the people organizing the interview didn't recognize that the Ramadan was going on. And so it was very uncomfortable. We ended up going to lunch, and this person didn't eat. We ate, and it's just like, okay, what are my options here? Do we not eat, and then you walk around the block with them? So it's just some of the sensitivities, if you ever get into that environment, that there's, I really think we're a much more mixed population now. And whether it's religious tolerance, sexual innuendos, I mean, it's all, you have to be extremely sensitive. And just when you're interviewing, or as the interviewers that are in this room, I encourage you to be sensitive to those things.
Marissa, do you have a
I
comment?
was just gonna state, when of course, I was a non-traditional student as well, and I had several interviews, and what helped me with the nerves was that when I went in for an interview, I went in that I was interviewing that company and whether I wanted to go work for them versus the other way around. And so I was prepared with, I knew about the company, I wanted to ask specific questions about that company, and I really wanted to know whether I wanted to come work for company A, B, or C. And that actually helped me with my nerves in that interview process.
So versus John asking you, what does your company do? The question could be, okay, do you have a management development plan for your new hires? And so that they can get a good cross-section of the company, and you can spend, I know some companies do a 6-month interview interval where I can spend 6 months in different departments, and then I can kind of decide what works best for my skills and in conjunction with you. That tells you that tells the interviewer that this person has some idea of what other companies do, and can evaluate. If your company doesn't do it, then they can evaluate. So, okay, well, what is your management development? What is your progression within the company? So I can, as you say, I can evaluate your company against other companies.
She makes a very good point, because when you go in that interview, you typically will be nervous, but if you look at it as you're interviewing that company just as much as they're interviewing you, it helps you to focus on key points that kind of reduce those nerves. And then if it's an oil and gas company, they're going to ask you the question, why do you want to go into oil and gas? So you better know something about oil and gas if you're interviewing for an oil and gas company or a casino or something like that. You should know why you want to be in that industry, rather than, well, I saw your sign and it looks great. Yeah, I need a job. So.
Jimmy made the comment about kind of like the prom date thing. And Kevin, I don't know if he's still in here, Bernie. He got it's kind of your connection with Mike. That probably wasn't a formal sitting face-to-face interview. And it's almost, in my experience, when you get a job outside that formal interview, it's kind of like dating. It's almost like flirting. You're giving a little, finding out, you're kind of feeling them out. Well, what's the organization? They're feeling you out at the same time. Not that formal structure, but it's
a good point. And this, a great date is the girl that's smart enough to show interest in the guy and his interest. And the guy talks all the time, and he says she's so interesting. And to a certain, so your points are spot on there. Questions like, well, could you tell me your story? Why did you decide to go to work for the company, and how, what was important to your success? But they would pick you to come interview people, and in the process, you can learn a lot about the company. And it's a way to deal with the nerves, because you're letting them talk for a while, so you can kind of get into a comfort zone.
I have an important take on this topic. When I'm interviewing on campus, it's way more about me learning about the student than it is the student learning about me or my company. And I'm going to do a mock interview later, and I'll say that at the beginning of the interview, because you're going to need to learn anything about my company when you come to the second interview or come to see us. So you have to be very comfortable talking about yourself, which isn't easy to do. That's what this interview is for. So you have to not be the good date that you get all interested in the other person asking questions. You have to turn it the other way and be really comfortable in answering his questions about your experiences.
Now, clearly, if you have a time window on a campus interview, that's different than if you're spending time with someone at the company.
Well, Howard, Eric, thank you very much.